There's a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much you did during the day. It's the exhaustion that comes from living inside your own head, from replaying a conversation that happened 3 days ago, analyzing every word, every pause, every micro-expression, searching for hidden meanings that probably were never there. It's the exhaustion of being awake at 2 a.m., your mind racing through scenarios that will never happen, problems that don't exist yet, and decisions that don't need to be made right now. This is the reality for millions of people trapped in the prison of overthinking. You might assume these are simply anxious people who worry too much, but that assumption misses something deeper. The psychology behind chronic overthinking is far more complex than mere anxiety or stress. It's a web of intelligence, trauma, perfectionism, and control mechanisms that create a mind that never truly rests. Understanding this psychology reveals something uncomfortable about the human brain itself, how easily it can become both our greatest tool and our worst enemy. When neuroscientists study people who overthink, they find something fascinating. The brain of an overthinker isn't malfunctioning. If anything, it's working too well. The prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for planning, analysis, and problem-solving, becomes hyperactive. It's like having a computer that never goes into sleep mode, constantly running background programs and draining energy, even when you're not actively using it. This isn't a character flaw. It's the brain adapting to a thinking pattern that has been reinforced over years. But how does someone become an overthinker? The path rarely begins in adulthood. It usually starts in childhood, often in environments where unpredictability was the norm. Maybe you grew up in a home where moods shifted without warning. One moment everything was calm, and the next, chaos exploded over something you never saw coming. In that environment, your young mind developed a survival strategy. If I can predict what will happen, if I can analyze every detail, every possibility, maybe I'll stay safe. Maybe I can prevent the next disaster. That hypervigilance becomes ingrained. Your brain learns that thinking ahead, considering every angle, preparing for every possible outcome isn't just helpful. It's essential for survival. So even when the dangerous environment is gone, even when you're finally safe, your brain doesn't know how to turn off that protective mechanism. It keeps scanning for threats, keeps analyzing patterns, keeps trying to predict and control outcomes that don't need to be controlled. There's something most people don't understand about overthinkers. They're not thinking about random things. They're trying to solve an equation that has no solution. They're trying to find certainty in a world that is fundamentally uncertain. And that's the trap, because the more you think, the more questions arise. The more questions arise, the more you feel the need to analyze. And the cycle never ends. What makes this especially cruel is that overthinkers are often highly intelligent people. Their minds are capable of deep analysis, pattern recognition, and complex problem solving. But that gift becomes a curse when it's applied to things that cannot be solved by thinking. You cannot think your way into knowing what someone really meant by that text message. You cannot analyze your way into predicting the future. You cannot overthink your way into control. Yet the overthinking mind refuses to accept this. It keeps trying, keeps searching, keeps looping in hopes that if it just thinks a little harder, a little longer, clarity will appear. The internal experience of overthinking is exhausting in ways people who don't struggle with it can't fully understand. Imagine waking up and immediately your mind starts cataloging everything you need to do today, everything that could go wrong, everything you wish you had done differently yesterday. You're in the shower, but you're not really there. You're mentally preparing for a conversation that may never happen. You're at breakfast, but you're not tasting your food. You're replaying something you said last week, wondering if it was misunderstood. Every moment splits in two. There's the moment you're physically in, and then there's the moment your mind is actually experiencing. Most of the time, those two moments don't align. You're never fully present because your mind is always somewhere else, rewinding the past or rehearsing the future. The present becomes only a brief stop between regrets and anxieties. Overthinkers develop a complicated relationship with their own thoughts. On one level, they recognize that their thinking is excessive, even irrational. They know analyzing a text for 20 minutes won't change what it means. They know worrying about a presentation won't make it go better. But knowing that doesn't stop the thoughts from coming. It's like knowing you shouldn't scratch an itch and being completely unable to stop yourself. The thoughts arrive uninvited, and once they're there, they demand attention. This creates an internal conflict that becomes its own source of stress. They overthink about overthinking. They criticize themselves for being unable to just relax, to just let things go, to be more like other people who seem to move through life without constant mental noise. That self-criticism adds yet another layer to the overthinking, forming a meta loop of thinking about thinking. What's particularly interesting is how overthinkers process social interactions. Every conversation becomes a performance they analyze both during and after. While talking to someone, part of their mind is monitoring how they're coming across. Are they talking too much? Too little? Did that joke land? Should they have said something different? And then, once the conversation ends, the real analysis begins. They replay the entire interaction, examining every moment for mistakes, misunderstandings, or signs that the other person was uncomfortable, bored, or judging them. This hyper-awareness makes genuine connection difficult. You can't be truly present with someone when half your mind is busy monitoring and analyzing the interaction. People feel when you're not fully there, even if they can't explain what feels off. The overthinker's desperate desire to connect perfectly actually creates distance because authentic connection requires a kind of presence that overthinking makes nearly impossible. The overthinking mind also struggles with decision-making in specific ways. Simple decisions become complex dilemmas. Choosing where to eat becomes an analysis of multiple factors. What everyone else might want, what's healthy, what's affordable, what will create the best experience, what could go wrong with each option. By the time they finish analyzing, everyone else has already decided. Or worse, they've exhausted the people around them with their inability to simply choose. Bigger decisions become paralyzing. Overthinkers don't just consider obvious outcomes. They consider second-order consequences, third-order possibilities, unlikely scenarios, and worst-case situations. They think about how they'll feel about the decision in 5 years. They imagine themselves looking back with regret. They seek more information, more opinions, more clarity before committing. But more information only creates more things to think about. Here, the connection to perfectionism becomes clear. Many overthinkers are perfectionists, and perfectionism is essentially an attempt to control outcomes through preparation and analysis. If I think through every detail, if I consider every angle, if I prepare for every possibility, then I can prevent failure, embarrassment, or disappointment. But perfectionism sets an impossible standard, and overthinking is the tool used to try to reach that standard. The tragedy is that overthinking often produces the opposite of what it intends. It's meant to bring clarity, but it creates confusion. It's meant to solve problems, but it generates new ones. It's meant to prepare you for the future, but it traps you in anxiety about it. Overthinkers work harder mentally than almost anyone, yet often accomplish less because they spend their energy in mental spinning instead of forward movement. Sleep becomes particularly difficult for overthinkers. The moment they lie down and close their eyes, the moment external stimulation decreases, their internal world grows louder. Without the distractions of the day to occupy their mind, thoughts flood in. Worries about tomorrow, regrets about today, memories from years ago that suddenly feel urgent to process. Their mind treats bedtime as an opportunity to finally address everything it was holding back, not realizing that 11 p.m. is not the time for existential reflection or problem solving. Many overthinkers develop elaborate strategies to quiet their minds. They try meditation apps, breathing exercises, sleep sounds, journaling, or exhausting themselves with workouts. Some of these help temporarily, but the underlying pattern persists because it's not just about finding the right technique. It's about understanding why the mind feels it needs to think so much in the first place. There is often a core belief driving the overthinking, a belief so fundamental the person might not even be consciously aware of it. It's the belief that if they think hard enough, long enough, deep enough, they can prevent bad things from happening. They can control outcomes. They can guarantee safety. This belief usually formed in childhood, in circumstances where thinking ahead genuinely helped navigate unstable or unpredictable situations. But adult life is fundamentally different from childhood. As children, we have limited control over our environment. Our safety depends on reading the room, predicting moods, and adapting to circumstances we can't change. As adults, we have more agency, more choice, more ability to shape our circumstances. But the overthinking brain hasn't updated its operating system. It's still running childhood survival software in an adult context where that level of hypervigilance is no longer necessary. Overthinking also affects how they experience emotions. When something good happens, they can't simply enjoy it. They think about when it will end, what could ruin it, whether they deserve it, or if they're missing some hidden flaw. When something bad happens, they don't just feel the emotion. They analyze why it happened, what it means, what they should have done differently, what it says about them. The emotion gets processed through so many layers of thought that the original feeling becomes buried under analysis. This creates a strange disconnection from their own emotional life. They can tell you extensively what they think about their feelings, but they struggle to simply feel them. Emotions become problems to solve rather than experiences to have. Sadness becomes something to analyze for causes and solutions. Joy becomes something to question and prepare for its inevitable end. Even their emotional world cannot escape overthinking. There's also a deep element of control in overthinkers. Uncertainty feels intolerable. Not knowing what someone thinks of them, not knowing how something will turn out, not knowing whether they made the right choice creates a discomfort that demands resolution. So they think, trying to create certainty where none exists. They analyze, trying to predict what cannot be predicted. They ruminate, trying to control what cannot be controlled. But here's the fascinating and tragic part. Overthinkers usually know intellectually that their thinking doesn't actually provide control. They know worrying about a plane crash doesn't make the plane safer. They know analyzing someone's words doesn't give them access to that person's mind. They know thinking about the future doesn't let them control it. But knowing doesn't stop doing. Because overthinking isn't about logic. It's about managing anxiety through a familiar pattern. Overthinking becomes a compulsion, similar to other compulsive behaviors. It provides temporary relief from the discomfort of uncertainty. When anxiety rises, thinking feels like taking action. It feels productive, like you're working on the problem. But it's the mental equivalent of pacing back and forth. It burns energy and creates the illusion of movement without going anywhere. What makes this especially painful is how isolating it becomes. Overthinkers often feel they can't fully explain what's happening in their minds to others. How do you describe spending 2 hours thinking about a 5-minute conversation? How do you explain being exhausted not from what you did today, but from everything you thought about doing, considered doing, worried about doing, or analyzed after doing? People who don't overthink often respond with dismissive advice. Just don't think about it. Just let it go. Just relax. As if overthinking were a choice, as if they haven't already tried simply not doing it. This isolation deepens because overthinkers often hide the full extent of their mental activity. They learn to appear calmer than they feel. They learn to keep their internal analysis to themselves. They smile and nod while their mind races through 17 different interpretations of what was just said. This performance of calm while experiencing internal chaos is exhausting on its own. There is also a particular kind of grief overthinkers carry, the grief of lost presence. All the moments they were physically there but mentally absent. Conversations they didn't fully experience because they were too busy analyzing. Experiences they couldn't enjoy because they were thinking about what might go wrong or what it all meant. They mourn a kind of lightness they see in others, an ability to simply be without the constant commentary, analysis, and prediction running in the background. And yet, within this struggle, something profound often develops. Overthinkers, through their constant internal processing, often gain deep insights into human nature, patterns, systems, and complexities others miss. Their analytical minds, while exhausting to live with, can produce remarkable understanding. They notice details others overlook. They consider perspectives others ignore. They see connections others miss. The challenge is learning to direct that mental ability toward what truly matters and release it from what doesn't. It's learning to distinguish between productive thinking and rumination, between real problem-solving and anxiety disguised as preparation. That distinction is harder than it sounds, because to the overthinking brain, every thought feels equally important, equally urgent, equally necessary. Understanding the psychology of overthinking reveals something important. It's not about stopping thoughts. That's impossible, and even undesirable. Thoughts are natural, and analytical thinking is valuable. The issue is the compulsive, repetitive rumination that gives the illusion of control while actually creating more distress. It's the inability to choose when to engage analytical thinking and when to let it rest. For those walking this path trapped in the exhausting cycle of overthinking, there's something important to understand. Your mind isn't broken. It is incredibly powerful, perhaps too powerful for its own good. It developed this pattern trying to protect you, trying to keep you safe, trying to give you control in situations where you had very little. That pattern once served a purpose, but you're no longer in those circumstances. You are safe enough now to let your mind rest, to trust that you don't need to figure everything out, predict everything, or control everything to be okay. The goal isn't to become someone who never thinks deeply. The goal is to become someone who can choose when to use that depth and when to simply be. To trust that not everything needs to be analyzed, not every thought needs to be followed, not every possibility needs to be considered. Sometimes the smartest thing your highly intelligent mind can do is rest. And that rest, that release from constant mental activity, is not giving up control. It's finally understanding that you never had it in the first place. And that's not failure, that's freedom.